More Than You Know, Finding Financial Wisdom in Unconventional Places, by Michael J. Mauboussin. Introduction. Picture this. You're in a Las Vegas casino, standing behind a blackjack table. The air is thick with a mixture of cheap perfume and quiet desperation. You're watching a man to your right. He has a 17. The dealer is showing a 6. Every person at the table knows the book. You stand on 17. It's the rule. It's simple. But this man. He looks at his cards, then at the dealer, and with a steady voice, he says, "Hit me." A silence falls over the table. The other players stop breathing. Even the dealer, a man who has seen everything, hesitates. He raises an eyebrow and asks, "Are you sure, sir?" The man just nods. The dealer pulls the next card from the shoe. He flips it over. It's a 4. The man has 21. The table exhales, a mix of shock and relief. And what does the dealer say? He smiles and says, "Nice hit." Now, you might think, wow, what a legend. But if you own the casino, you would want every single player at that table to make that exact same bet. Why? Because for every one time that man gets a 4, there are 1,000 times he gets a 10 and busts. His outcome was good, but his process was terrible. He got lucky. And in the long run, the house doesn't win on luck. It wins on process. That single story, my friend, is the key to unlocking one of the most powerful books on decision-making ever written. Today, we are diving into Michael J. Maubussin's masterpiece, More Than You Know. This isn't just a book about investing. It's a guide to building a toolbox of mental models that will fundamentally change how you see the world. Michael Mauboussin is a rare kind of thinker. He spent his career at the highest levels of Wall Street, but his mind lives in the worlds of biology, physics, psychology, and complexity science. He's the kind of person who can explain stock market crashes using the behavior of ant colonies, or teach you about business strategy by studying the evolution of the human brain. And in this book, he has gathered the most profound lessons from these unconventional places and woven them into a tapestry of financial wisdom. My promise to you today is this: by the end of our journey, you will no longer see investing, or any complex decision, as a game of guessing. You will see it as a game of process. You will learn to think in probabilities, to understand the psychology that derails us, and to see the hidden patterns that govern our world. You will learn not just to play the game, but to be the house. So, let's begin. Let's build that latticework of mental models that the world's greatest thinkers use to navigate reality. Book summary. Let's start with that blackjack player. He won the hand, right? His wallet got fatter. By any simple measure, he succeeded. And this is where most of us get trapped in life. We judge our decisions based on the outcome. If we get the job, it was a good interview. If we make money on a stock, it was a good investment. If we pass the test, it was a good way to study. But Mauboussin asks us to pause and consider a revolutionary idea. In any field where luck plays a role, and that includes almost everything important in life, you must separate the process from the outcome. Think about it like this. A good process with a bad outcome is a bad break. A bad process with a good outcome is just dumb luck. The man who hit on 17 experienced dumb luck. A good process with a good outcome is deserved success. And a bad process with a bad outcome? That's poetic justice. The goal, over a lifetime, is not to chase dumb luck. It's to build a process so sound that you consistently put yourself in a position for deserved success. That's what casinos do. They don't know if the next spin of the roulette wheel will be red or black. They just know that over thousands of spins, their small edge, their process, will guarantee they come out ahead. Your first mission, in investing and in life, is to build a process that gives you an edge. You have to learn to be the house. So what does a good process look like? It begins with understanding that the world isn't a series of certainties. It's a spectrum of probabilities. Robert Rubin, the former U.S. Treasury Secretary, built his entire career on 4 principles for decision-making. First, the only certainty is that there is no certainty. We are constantly dealing with imperfect information. Second, every decision is a matter of weighing probabilities and payoffs. It's not just about how likely something is to happen, but what the consequences are if it does. Third, despite all the uncertainty, you still have to act. And fourth, you must judge your decisions not just on the results, but on how they were made. This idea of weighing probability and payoff leads us to one of the most counterintuitive and vital lessons in the entire book. Mauboussin calls it the Babe Ruth effect. We all know Babe Ruth as one of the greatest home run hitters of all time. But what many people forget is that for many years, he also held the record for the most strikeouts. He swung for the fences. He understood that in baseball, and in investing, it's not the frequency of your successes that matters most. It's the magnitude. Imagine you're a portfolio manager. The company you work for decides to evaluate you based on your batting average. What percentage of the stocks you pick actually beat the market? Let's say you pick 10 stocks. 9 of them go down by 1%. The 10th one goes up by 500%. Your batting average is terrible. Only 1 out of 10 of your picks was a winner. You'd probably get fired. But your overall portfolio performance would be incredible. This is the Babe Ruth effect. The frequency of correctness doesn't matter, it is the magnitude of correctness that matters. Our brains are wired to hate being wrong. Psychologists call this loss aversion. We feel the pain of a loss about 2.5 times more intensely than we feel the pleasure of an equivalent gain. This psychological tick makes us want to win often, even if the wins are small. We'd rather get 10 small hits than risk striking out 9 times to hit 1 giant home run. But the greatest investors, thinkers, and even gamblers have learned to fight this instinct. They think in terms of expected value. They know that a bet with a 70% chance of winning a little bit can be a terrible bet if the 30% chance of losing involves losing a lot. Conversely, a bet with only a 10% chance of winning can be a fantastic bet if the payoff is enormous. As Warren Buffett's partner Charlie Munger says, the great investors automatically think in terms of decision trees. They ask, what are the possible outcomes? What is the probability of each outcome? And what is the payoff for each? They don't get seduced by a high probability of being right. They get seduced by a positive expected value. This mindset is your first major tool. Stop asking, will this stock go up? And start asking, what does the current price imply about the future? And what is the range of possible outcomes? You have to stop thinking like a fan in the stands, cheering for a hit, and start thinking like the manager of the team, playing the odds over a long season. But this brings up a fascinating question. If this probabilistic approach is so powerful, why do so many smart people in the investment world seem to ignore it? Why is the average mutual fund manager turning over their entire portfolio almost every single year, behaving more like a frantic trader than a long-term owner? Here, Mauboussin introduces a subtle but crucial distinction: the difference between the investment profession and the investment business. The profession is about maximizing long-term returns for clients. The business is about maximizing short-term profits for the investment firm by gathering as many assets as possible. And unfortunately, the business is often at war with the profession. Think about it. What's good for the profession? Long time horizons, low fees, and a contrarian approach that sometimes looks wrong in the short term. What's good for the business? Short time horizons that keep clients from getting impatient, higher fees to boost revenues, and selling whatever is popular right now to attract new money. This tension explains why so many managers end up closet indexing. They hug the benchmark so they never look too wrong, even if it means they'll never be very right. As the famous economist John Maynard Keynes once said, worldly wisdom teaches that it is better for reputation to fail conventionally than to succeed unconventionally. It's safer for the business to be mediocre with the crowd than to risk being brilliant alone. So, we have our first set of tools. Focus on process, not outcome. Think in probabilities and expected value. And be aware of the tension between playing to win and just playing not to lose. But even with this philosophy, we are still our own worst enemies. Our minds are a minefield of psychological traps, and if we don't learn to navigate them, the best philosophy in the world won't save us. This brings us to the second great theme of the book, the psychology of investing. Imagine you're at a Tupperware party. You probably didn't even want to go, but your friend is hosting, so you feel obligated. The moment you walk in, you're offered a free gift. Then you play a little game and win some play money to bid on prizes. You're having fun. Then, people start sharing stories about how much they love their Tupperware. Your friend, the host, starts demonstrating the products. She's not a stranger. You like her. You trust her. Before you know it, you're buying a set of plastic containers you didn't even know you needed. What just happened? You've just been expertly manipulated by what psychologist Robert Cialdini calls the weapons of influence. And Mauboussin shows us that these same forces are at play in the stock market every single day. First, there was reciprocity. They gave you a gift, so you felt an unconscious need to give something back, like your money. Second, there was commitment and consistency. By participating in the games, you've started down a path of engagement, and it's psychologically easier to continue down that path than to reverse course. Third, there was social validation. Everyone around you is buying, so it must be the right thing to do. We are herd animals, and we look to others for cues on how to behave, especially when we're uncertain. Finally, there was liking. The request to buy came from a friend you like and trust, not a slick salesperson. These forces are incredibly powerful, and they constantly lead us astray as investors. When a stock is soaring, and everyone from your barber to the experts on TV is talking about it, the pull of social validation is almost irresistible. We see a crowd running in one direction, and our deepest instinct is to run with them, abandoning our own analysis. This is what Mauboussin calls guppy love. Like female guppies who will ignore their genetic preference for brightly colored mates if they see other females choosing dull ones, investors will often ignore their own fundamental beliefs to follow the crowd. It's not just external forces that trip us up. Our own brains have two different operating systems, and they're often in conflict. Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel laureate, calls them System 1 and System 2. System 1 is your gut. It's fast, intuitive, automatic, and emotional. It's the part of your brain that gives you a bad feeling about something or makes you instantly like a person. System 2 is your conscious, analytical mind. It's slow, deliberate, effortful, and logical. It's the part that solves math problems. We like to think our investment decisions are driven by System 2, by careful analysis. But the truth is, System 1 is almost always in the driver's seat. We get a good feeling about a company, we like their products, and then we use System 2 to construct a rational sounding story to justify our gut instinct. This is called the affect heuristic. If we feel good about something, we judge the risks to be low and the benefits to be high. If we feel bad about it, we do the opposite. Our feelings come first, and our analysis follows. This is why stress is so dangerous for investors. Mauboussin draws on the work of biologist Robert Sapolsky, who wrote a brilliant book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. A zebra's stress is acute and physical, a lion is chasing it. Our stress, on the other hand, is chronic and psychological, work deadlines, market volatility, relationship problems. The tragedy is that our bodies react to psychological stress with the same physiological fight or flight response as a zebra running from a lion. And what does this stress response do? It forces us into short-term thinking. Your body mobilizes all its resources for the immediate crisis. It doesn't care about long-term projects. When you're stressed about your portfolio dropping, your brain screams, "Do something. Sell. Stop the pain now." It shortens your time horizon from years to minutes. This, Mauboussin argues, is a major reason why portfolio turnover has skyrocketed. The constant stress of short-term performance pressure makes it psychologically painful to hold on for the long term. So how do we fight back against these deep-seated psychological biases? Mauboussin suggests a few strategies. First, know yourself. Understand your own emotional triggers and psychological weak spots. Second, build a process and stick to it, especially when your emotions are screaming at you to abandon it. This is your defense against impulse. And third, and perhaps most importantly, lengthen your evaluation period. If you look at your portfolio every day, you're almost guaranteed to experience the pain of loss aversion. If you evaluate it once a year, you're far more likely to see gains and feel the positive utility of a long-term strategy. You have to, as the saying goes, bind yourself to the mast like Ulysses to resist the siren song of short-term market noise. Okay, so we've established a philosophy based on process and probability, and we've explored the psychological demons that try to sabotage it. Now, let's turn our attention to the outside world, the world of business, innovation, and competition. How do we apply these mental models to understand how industries rise and fall? Here, Mauboussin takes us to the savannah, watching a pride of lions. There's an old, dominant leader, and there are young, hungry challengers. The old lion might fend off the challengers for a while, but eventually, inevitably, a younger, stronger lion will take over. And here's the key insight. While not every challenger becomes the new leader is always a challenger. This is a powerful metaphor for creative destruction in business. The dominant companies of today are the old lions. They are powerful, but they are also often slow, bureaucratic, and resistant to change. The challengers are the startups, the innovators, the companies with new technologies or new business models. And just like on the savannah, the evidence is overwhelming. New entrants generate far higher returns for shareholders than their older, more established competitors. Why? It's all about expectations. The growth of a new industry often follows an S-curve. In the beginning, point A, growth is slow, and most people are skeptical. Investor expectations are too low. Then, the industry hits an inflection point, and growth explodes. This is where the challengers thrive, and their stock prices soar as the market's expectations race to catch up with reality. But then, as the industry matures, growth inevitably slows down. Point B. The problem is, investors are now used to the high growth, and they extrapolate it into the future. Their expectations are now too high. When the inevitable slowdown comes, the stocks crash. Point C. The goal of an intelligent investor is to buy at point A and sell at point B. The tragedy is that most people do the opposite. They get imprinted by the success of the old leaders and want to buy them after their great run, right when they are hitting the top of the S-curve. As Mauboussin puts it, in a fast-changing world, you're almost always better off betting on the new guard than the old. But what drives this constant cycle of creation and destruction? Mauboussin argues that innovation isn't some magical, mysterious event. It's a process of recombination. Think of the Wright brothers. They didn't invent the airplane out of thin air. They took existing technologies, a light gasoline engine, bicycle parts, wings based on bird anatomy, and they recombined them in a novel way. Innovation is like playing with Legos. The more building blocks you have, and the more ways you can combine them, the more new things you can create. And because the number of ideas and technologies is constantly growing, the pace of innovation itself is accelerating. This process has a fascinating parallel in the development of a child's brain. From birth to age 3, a toddler's brain creates an insane number of connections between neurons, twice as many as an adult. It's a period of wild experimentation. Then, through a process of pruning, the connections that are useful get strengthened, and the ones that aren't used are eliminated. It seems wasteful, but this process of overproduction followed by selection is nature's most robust way to adapt to a new environment. The birth of a new industry looks exactly the same. First, there's a fluid phase of massive experimentation, with hundreds of new companies trying different approaches, just like the dot-com boom. Then comes a transitional phase, a brutal shakeout where most of those companies fail, and a dominant design emerges. Think of the early automobile industry, which had over 500 car manufacturers. Over time, they were pruned down to just a handful. The same pattern happened with television sets, disk drives, and personal computers. The lesson for investors is twofold. First, recognize that the path to innovation is paved with failure. The boom and bust cycle is not a sign of a broken system, it's the sign of a healthy, adaptive one. Second, after the pruning is over, the survivors often present an incredible investment opportunity. They have weathered the storm and now have a clear path to dominate a new industry. To navigate this constantly changing world, we can't rely on rigid, long-term plans. The future is too uncertain. Instead, Mauboussin points to the strategies of chess grandmasters. Great chess players don't try to see 20 moves ahead, the future is too fuzzy. Instead, they only look a few moves ahead. They develop a set of options, and they constantly revise them based on how the game unfolds. They play for small, incremental advantages that add up over time. In business, this translates to what some call strategy as simple rules. Instead of a complex, 500-page strategic plan, successful companies in dynamic environments often operate with a handful of simple, hard and fast rules. These rules define a direction without locking the company into a rigid path. They provide a framework for making good short-term decisions that add up to a successful long-term journey, even when the final destination is unknown. It's about being adaptable, about constantly seeking a higher peak on a fitness landscape that is always shifting. This brings us to the deepest and most profound part of Mauboussin's work, the lessons from science and complexity theory. If we really want to understand the market, we have to stop thinking of it like a machine and start thinking of it like a living organism. For centuries, science was dominated by the Newtonian, reductionist view of the world. The idea was that you could understand any system, no matter how complex, by breaking it down into its smallest parts and studying them. If you understood the gears, you could understand the clock. But this approach fails completely when it comes to complex adaptive systems, systems where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Think of an ant colony. There is no leader, no central command. Each individual ant is following a few simple rules, reacting only to the ants in its immediate vicinity. Yet, from these simple, local interactions, a stunningly intelligent collective behavior emerges. The colony builds complex nests, forages for food with incredible efficiency, and even allocates its workforce between different tasks. You could study a single ant for 100 years and you would never understand the colony. The intelligence is not in the ant, it is in the system. The stock market, Mauboussin argues, is a complex adaptive system. It's a collection of millions of individual investors, each with their own beliefs, strategies, and time horizons, all interacting with one another. The market's intelligence, its ability to efficiently price assets, emerges from this collective interaction. This is why listening to any single expert to explain the market's daily moves is what Mauboussin calls the janitor's dream. It's like asking the janitor in the basement of a skyscraper to explain the conversations happening in the penthouse. He's at the wrong level of analysis. The market's behavior is an emergent property of the entire system, and no single individual can fully explain it. This view also explains why markets are usually efficient. As long as there is a diversity of opinions and strategies among investors, their individual errors tend to cancel each other out. If you think a stock is worth $50 and I think it's worth $30, and we are both wrong, the price might settle at $40, which could be right. The diversity of our errors leads to a correct collective answer. But what happens when that diversity breaks down? What happens when everyone starts thinking the same way, following the same strategy? That's when the market becomes fragile and susceptible to booms and crashes. It's like an ant colony where all the ants accidentally follow each other in a circle, marching until they die of exhaustion. This is hurting. This is a bubble. This perspective also helps us understand one of the most stubborn facts about financial markets. They don't follow a neat, tidy bell curve. Standard finance theory is built on the assumption that price changes are normally distributed. But the real world is a world of fat tails. This means that extreme events, huge, single-day crashes or soaring rallies, happen far more often than the standard models would predict. The crash of 1987 was a 20 standard deviation event. According to the bell curve, an event like that should happen about once in the entire lifetime of the universe. These fat tails are a signature of complex adaptive systems. They operate in a state of self-organized criticality, like a pile of sand. As you add grains of sand one by one, the pile grows. Most grains cause nothing to happen. But every now and then, a single grain of sand can trigger an avalanche. The key is that the size of the avalanche is not proportional to the size of the trigger. A small event can lead to a huge outcome. This is why trying to find a clear cause for every market effect is often a fool's errand. Our brains are wired as interpreters, constantly trying to create a neat story that connects cause and effect. But in a complex system like the market, the links are not always so clear. Sometimes, the market moves dramatically for no single, obvious reason. It's just the cumulative effect of thousands of small, interconnected decisions. Recognizing the market as a complex, fat-tailed system has huge implications. It means that risk is not just about volatility, it's about the possibility of rare but catastrophic events. It means that diversification is even more important than we think. And it means that we should be deeply humble about our ability to predict the future. This is the ultimate mental model that Mauboussin offers us. To see the world not as a collection of independent things, but as a web of interconnected systems. To understand that simple rules can lead to complex behavior. To appreciate the wisdom of the collective, and to be wary of moments when the crowd loses its mind. To accept that we live in a world governed not by simple certainties, but by probabilities and power laws. It's a way of thinking that asks you to be intellectually curious, to draw ideas from biology, psychology, physics, and history. To be a student of human nature and a student of systems. To build, piece by piece, your own stairway to shareholder heaven, not by trying to predict the future, but by building a process robust enough to handle whatever the future brings. Commentary. As we come to the end of our journey through More Than You Know, I want you to take a step back and think about what we've really learned. This book isn't a collection of stock tips or a get-rich-quick formula. It's something far more valuable. It's an invitation to become a different kind of thinker. The single most powerful lesson from Michael Maubussin's work is the idea of building a latticework of mental models, a concept he borrows from the great Charlie Munger. The idea is simple but profound. You cannot understand the world through a single lens. A person who is only an economist will see every problem as an economic problem. A person who is only a psychologist will see only psychological biases. The true masters are those who have a toolbox full of models from different disciplines and know which tool to use for which job. This book is that toolbox. It teaches you to think like a casino owner, focusing on process over outcome. It teaches you to think like a baseball scout, understanding that a few home runs can make up for a lot of strikeouts. It teaches you to think like a psychologist, recognizing the emotional traps that derail rational thought. It teaches you to think like a biologist, seeing businesses and industries as living ecosystems that are constantly evolving. And it teaches you to think like a physicist, appreciating the complex, emergent nature of markets. In a world that increasingly demands narrow specialization, this book is a radical call for intellectual breadth. It argues that the most fertile ground for new ideas is not deep within a single discipline, but at the intersections between them. The future belongs to the connectors, the synthesizers, the people who can see the patterns that others miss because they are looking at the world through too small a window. So, how can you start building this latticework in your own life? Starting today, here are 3 simple, practical actions you can take. First, start a decision journal. The next time you make an important decision, whether it's an investment, a choice about college, or a personal commitment, write down what you decided, why you decided it, and what you expect to happen. Don't just focus on the outcome you want, write down the probabilities of different outcomes. This simple act does 2 crucial things. It forces you to focus on your process, and it provides you with honest feedback, protecting you from the hindsight bias that makes us all think we knew what was going to happen all along. Second, read 1 book a month from a field that has absolutely nothing to do with your primary interests. If you love history, pick up a book on neuroscience. If you're a science whiz, read a biography of a great artist. This is how you collect new mental models. You are intentionally diversifying your mind, just as you would diversify a portfolio. You never know where your next great idea will come from. And third, the next time you hear someone on the news confidently explain why the stock market went up or down yesterday, I want you to smile to yourself. Remember the janitor's dream. Remember the sand pile. And recognize that they are just feeding our brains' innate need for a simple story, even if that story has little to do with reality. This skepticism will be one of your greatest assets. That was a summary of More Than You Know by Michael J. Mauboussin. We've explored the core ideas today, but a summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful country. The real adventure, the true understanding, comes from walking the terrain yourself. The book is filled with stories, studies, and moments of insight that we just couldn't cover. If anything we've discussed has sparked your curiosity or challenged the way you think, I truly encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about gaining knowledge, it's about upgrading your mental software. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It lets us know we're on the right track, and it ensures you won't miss our next exploration into another one of the transformative books from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's continue this journey of learning and growing together.